The cruelest fate is not dying once, it is waking up where every mistake can happen again. Madeline Carter kept her head high as the great hall fell into a silence so complete that even the crackling torches seemed afraid to breathe. Hundreds of eyes watched her from polished stone balconies, yet not one face offered comfort. She had once believed this castle would become her home, that the Alpha King who stood before the ancient throne would one day smile at her instead of through her. Now Damon Ashford looked at her with the distant composure of a ruler carrying the weight of a kingdom instead of the heart of a man. His black armor reflected the golden light from towering chandeliers, the heavy fur across his shoulders making him appear larger than life, while the crimson royal cloak behind him flowed like a silent warning. Madeline searched his face one last time, hoping for the smallest sign that the bond they had once shared still mattered. There was nothing except duty. Around her, whispers spread through the court like cold wind across dry leaves. Some called her unfortunate. Others insisted justice demanded sacrifice. None of them knew the truth she had carried alone, the truth that had never found a voice before suspicion buried it beneath fear. Damon slowly rose from his throne, his expression unreadable, but something flickered deep within his silver eyes, so brief that even he seemed unaware of it. His wolf stirred beneath the surface, restless without reason, as though protesting a future his mind refused to understand. Madeline felt the invisible thread connecting their souls tighten until it became almost impossible to breathe. She remembered the first time she had felt that bond, warm as sunrise and filled with impossible hope. Now it trembled like fragile glass moments before breaking. She closed her eyes, not because she feared what came next, but because she could no longer bear watching the man she had loved choose his kingdom over the girl destiny had chosen for him. A sharp ache spread through her chest, and the sacred bond shattered into countless unseen fragments. For one endless heartbeat, time itself seemed to hesitate. Then, everything disappeared. The echo of voices faded. The warmth vanished. The darkness swallowed every sound. Madeline opened her eyes with a gasp and found herself standing beneath blooming white dogwood trees outside the Mooncrest Palace gardens. Morning sunlight painted the stone paths in soft gold. Birds sang from branches that had long since been cut down in the future she remembered. Her heartbeat raced as familiar scents filled the spring air. She knew this place. She knew this day. Slowly, trembling, she looked toward the palace entrance where servants hurried with baskets of fresh flowers and banners bearing the Ashford crest. Tomorrow would be the royal mate ceremony. Tomorrow was the day everything had begun to fall apart. Her hands shook as memories rushed through her mind, not as distant dreams but as living moments that refused to loosen their grip. She remembered every choice she had made, every conversation she wished she had never trusted, every warning she had ignored because she believed kindness would always overcome envy. The realization settled over her with breathtaking clarity. She had not been given another chance to relive the same story. She had been given one chance to rewrite it. Madeline inhaled slowly until the panic eased. This time she would not wait for fate to decide her future. She would not chase a love that ended in heartbreak. She would not stand where lies could trap her again. Somewhere inside the palace, Damon Ashford was preparing for a ceremony that had once changed both their lives forever. This time he would search the crowded hall for the Omega who never arrived, while she quietly walked in the opposite direction, leaving destiny itself to wonder what had just changed. Madeline Carter walked through the quiet streets beyond the palace walls with steady steps, although every heartbeat reminded her she was moving farther away from the future she had once accepted without question. The familiar village awakened beneath the gentle light of dawn as merchants arranged fresh bread, children laughed while chasing one another across the square, and wagons rolled slowly toward the market. In her first life, she had never noticed how peaceful the morning had been because she had spent every waking moment preparing herself to become the Alpha King's mate. Now every ordinary sound felt precious because she remembered how quickly peace could disappear. She paused beside the old stone fountain where she had once promised herself that love alone would overcome every obstacle. This time she whispered a different promise. She would choose wisdom before hope. She would trust actions instead of beautiful words. She would survive. At the same moment, preparations for the royal mate ceremony filled Mooncrest Palace with excitement. Servants carried silver decorations through endless hallways while musicians rehearsed elegant melodies that echoed beneath vaulted ceilings. Damon Ashford stood alone inside the royal training courtyard, his long black hair shifting gently in the morning breeze as he completed another series of powerful sword movements. Every strike was precise, yet something felt strangely wrong. His wolf refused to settle. A quiet uneasiness lingered inside him, growing stronger with every passing minute. He lowered his sword and frowned toward the distant hills beyond the palace walls without understanding why they suddenly seemed more important than the ceremony awaiting him tomorrow. Captain Garrett Holloway approached and offered a respectful bow before informing the Alpha King that every noble family had confirmed their attendance. Damon nodded automatically, but his thoughts remained elsewhere. He could not explain the strange feeling that someone important was slowly slipping beyond his reach before he had ever truly known them. Garrett noticed the distraction but wisely asked no questions. Across the palace, Vivian Hawthorne admired her reflection while attendants carefully adjusted the elegant gown she intended to wear during the ceremony. In her memory, every step toward becoming Luna had always appeared effortless because Madeline had never challenged the carefully woven lies surrounding the court. Yet today a messenger quietly informed Vivian that Madeline had unexpectedly declined an invitation to the royal gardens. The news lasted only a few seconds, but it planted an uncomfortable seed of doubt. Madeline had always been predictable. She had always followed every custom with quiet obedience. Why had she suddenly changed? Meanwhile, Madeline reached a modest cottage near the forest where an elderly woman carefully tended blooming herbs beneath a wooden porch. Beatrice Whitmore looked up before Madeline could speak, her weathered eyes lingering on the young Omega with surprising intensity. Without asking a single question, the old seer softly said, "Some people return carrying memories that time was never meant to keep." Madeline felt every breath leave her lungs. She had shared her secret with no one, yet Beatrice's calm expression held neither fear nor surprise. The old woman invited her inside and placed a warm cup of herbal tea on the table before opening an ancient journal filled with faded sketches of wolves, moons, and twisting branches that resembled the roots of destiny itself. She quietly explained that fate could bend but never without consequence. Every choice would save one future while awakening another that no one had expected. Madeline listened carefully, understanding that changing her own path might also reshape the lives of countless others. As the afternoon sun drifted lower across the sky, Damon suddenly stopped in the middle of a royal meeting when an unfamiliar ache tightened across his chest. It vanished almost instantly, leaving only confusion behind, but his wolf lifted its head with silent urgency as though searching for someone who should have been standing beside them. Miles away, Madeline stepped out of Beatrice's cottage carrying the ancient journal beneath her arm. She looked toward the distant silhouette of Mooncrest Palace, then turned away once more, never noticing that somewhere behind those towering walls, destiny itself had already begun searching for the girl who had chosen not to be found. The ancient journal felt heavier with every mile Madeline Carter carried it through the forest, as though its worn leather cover held more than faded pages. It held warnings. It held forgotten truths. Most of all, it held the weight of choices that could change an entire kingdom. The narrow trail curved beneath towering pine trees until she reached a wooden bridge crossing a quiet stream that reflected the pale afternoon sky. In her first life she had crossed this bridge only once, hurrying toward the palace after hearing rumors that a royal messenger had been searching for her. She remembered arriving just in time to witness a terrible accident that had claimed the life of an elderly royal archivist. No one had realized that his death had erased knowledge the kingdom would desperately need years later. This time, as the memory settled into place with startling clarity, Madeline suddenly stopped. Ahead of her, the old wooden railing groaned beneath the weight of a heavily loaded wagon carrying dusty chests overflowing with scrolls and books. The gray-haired driver struggled to calm two frightened horses as one wolf slipped dangerously close to the edge of the bridge. Without thinking, Madeline hurried forward, speaking softly to the anxious animals until they recognized her calm voice. Their nervous breathing slowed just enough for the driver to regain control. Together they carefully guided the wagon back onto solid ground. The elderly man climbed down with visible relief, offering a grateful smile that carried the quiet dignity of someone accustomed to serving history instead of kings. He introduced himself as Edmund Hale, the chief royal archivist, and explained that he had been transporting centuries of records to a secure library inside Mooncrest Palace before the coming ceremony. Madeline felt her pulse quicken. Edmund Hale had not survived this journey before. She knew that with absolute certainty. Yet here he stood alive, brushing dust from his sleeves while thanking her for saving not only him but the knowledge entrusted to his care. Fate had already begun changing. Edmund reached into one weathered chest and carefully removed a rolled parchment sealed with dark blue wax. He hesitated before placing it in Madeline's hands. He admitted he had discovered the document hidden inside an abandoned royal vault only the previous evening and intended to study it after the ceremony. The seal displayed an unfamiliar crest formed by a silver wolf, surrounded by blooming branches instead of the Ashford crown. Madeline recognized it instantly from one faded illustration inside Beatrice Whitmore's journal. Before she could ask another question, Edmund simply smiled and said that history often protected its greatest secrets until the right heart appeared to uncover them. As the archivist continued toward the palace, Madeline watched the wagon disappear along the winding road, realizing she had preserved far more than a single life. Deep within Mooncrest Palace, Damon Ashford abruptly paused during a council meeting as a strange warmth spread through the invisible bond his wolf refused to ignore. It lasted only a heartbeat before fading, but unlike the aching emptiness he had felt before, this sensation carried unexpected relief, as though someone precious had just escaped a danger he could not see. His advisors continued discussing preparations for visiting nobles, yet Damon heard almost none of it. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, destiny had shifted again. Elsewhere, Vivian Hawthorne quietly questioned one of her trusted attendants about Madeline's movements. The report unsettled her even more than before. The quiet Omega had visited the old seer. She had avoided every royal invitation. She had been seen helping a stranger on the Eastern Bridge instead of preparing for the mate ceremony. None of it matched the predictable future Vivian had carefully planned. For the first time, uncertainty touched the confident smile she had always worn with effortless grace. Standing alone beneath the evening sky, Madeline carefully unrolled the mysterious parchment. Although age had faded much of the ink, one sentence remained perfectly clear, written in elegant script that seemed untouched by time. It read, "When the forgotten blood returns before the broken bond, the kingdom shall recognize the Luna it once failed to see." The words on the ancient parchment lingered in Madeline Carter's mind long after the last light of day disappeared beyond the distant mountains. She folded the fragile document with careful hands before placing it inside the worn journal Beatrice Whitmore had entrusted to her. Every instinct urged her to hide both items where no curious eyes could find them. If the prophecy had survived centuries in secret, there had to be powerful reasons why. The cool evening air carried the scent of pine and wildflowers as she followed a quiet trail leading toward a modest inn several miles from Mooncrest Palace. In her first life she would have spent this night rehearsing every polite greeting she planned to offer Damon Ashford during the mate ceremony. Instead, she rented a simple room beneath a sloping roof and welcomed the unfamiliar peace that came with choosing herself over expectation. Yet sleep refused to come easily. Each time she closed her eyes, new memories blended with old ones until she could no longer tell whether they belonged to the past or to a future still waiting to be written. Before dawn she awoke from a dream unlike any she had ever known. She stood inside the royal throne room, but it was empty except for Damon. He was kneeling before the throne instead of sitting upon it, his shoulders weighed down by sorrow rather than authority. His silver eyes searched the silent hall while he whispered a single name that echoed through the empty chamber. He spoke her name with such quiet regret that her heart ached before she opened her eyes. The dream vanished with the sunrise, yet the emotion remained. Miles away inside Mooncrest Palace, Damon rose abruptly from his bed before the first servants entered his chambers. His breathing was uneven, and his wolf paced restlessly beneath his calm exterior. He remembered almost nothing from his own dream except a strange feeling of unbearable loss and the image of delicate white dogwood blossoms drifting across cold stone floors. He walked toward the balcony overlooking the palace gardens where workers completed the final decorations for the mate ceremony. Noble families would begin arriving within hours. Every tradition demanded that the Alpha King greet them with confidence, but an unfamiliar emptiness lingered inside him. Queen Mother Rosalind Ashford quietly joined her son without announcing her presence. Years of watching kings had taught her to recognize burdens that words could not explain. She studied Damon's thoughtful expression before gently asking whether his wolf had become unusually restless. Damon hesitated before admitting that it had. He confessed that he felt as though someone important was missing from a story he had never lived. Rosalind said nothing for several moments before reminding him that wolves sometimes sense truths long before people accepted them. Her calm voice offered no answers, only patience. Meanwhile, Vivian Hawthorne welcomed visiting nobles with flawless elegance, but behind every graceful smile her thoughts remained fixed on Madeline's disappearance from the expected path. She discreetly instructed Gideon Mercer to learn everything possible about the Omega's recent movements without attracting attention. Gideon accepted the request with quiet confidence, believing it would be nothing more than another simple investigation. Neither of them realized that every answer would lead farther away from the future they believed they controlled. Later that afternoon, Madeline returned to the edge of the forest where Beatrice waited beside a circle of ancient standing stones bathed in golden sunlight. Without asking how Madeline had slept, the old seer gently touched the cover of the journal and smiled with quiet understanding. She explained that some memories belonged not to the mind but to the soul, and when destiny changed course, those memories often reached the Alpha's wolf before they ever reached the Alpha himself. Madeline lowered her eyes as she considered Damon's strange reactions she had witnessed from afar. If his wolf was beginning to remember emotions that his heart could not explain, then the bond between them had not truly disappeared. It had only taken a different path. Before Madeline could ask another question, a powerful breeze swept through the ancient stones, lifting the pages of the journal until one hidden sheet slipped free and landed at her feet. Unlike every page before it, this one contained a detailed drawing of the silver wolf crest beside the unmistakable image of a young woman whose face looked remarkably like her own. Madeline Carter could not look away from the faded portrait resting upon the fallen page. Although the ink had softened with age, every detail remained unmistakable. The young woman carried the same thoughtful eyes, the same gentle expression, and even the same strand of light brown hair that refused to remain tucked behind one ear. It was as though someone centuries ago had painted a reflection of her long before she had ever been born. Beneath the portrait, elegant handwriting described the woman only as the first Silver Luna, the guardian whose compassion had united divided packs during an age when fear threatened to destroy them all. No family name appeared beside the title. No explanation followed. The final lines had been deliberately removed, leaving behind only rough edges where the parchment had once continued. Madeline slowly lifted her eyes toward Beatrice Whitmore, whose quiet expression revealed that none of this surprised her. The old seer gently explained that history often remembered kings because they wore crowns, while the women who quietly saved kingdoms disappeared beneath generations of forgotten stories. She believed someone had intentionally hidden the truth long ago, waiting until the proper time for it to return. Before Madeline could ask who would erase such an important history, Beatrice answered with a sadness that seemed older than the mountains surrounding them. She said that fear always tried to bury hope because hope had the power to change everything. Those words echoed through Madeline's thoughts as she carefully returned the page to the journal. If the first Silver Luna truly shared her face, then the prophecy was no longer simply about fate. It was about family, legacy, and a truth someone had worked very hard to conceal. At Mooncrest Palace, the royal mate ceremony officially began beneath bright banners fluttering above the great courtyard. Noble guests filled marble walkways while musicians welcomed every arriving family with graceful melodies. Damon Ashford stood at the entrance in full ceremonial armor, greeting each visitor with calm dignity, yet every passing moment deepened the quiet uneasiness within him. His wolf searched every unfamiliar face with restless determination, waiting for someone who never appeared. Several respected elders quietly exchanged puzzled glances because they had never seen an alpha king become so distracted during such an important tradition. Damon himself could not understand why every smile offered by the assembled guests felt incomplete, as though the ceremony had begun with one essential person missing. Across the courtyard, Vivian Hawthorne noticed the subtle changes immediately. Damon answered polite conversations a heartbeat too late. His gaze repeatedly wandered toward the palace gates before returning to the crowd. His wolf's quiet agitation became impossible for someone as observant as Vivian to ignore. She excused herself from the gathering and found Gideon Mercer waiting in a shaded corridor. Gideon reported that Madeline had visited Edmund Hale shortly after rescuing him on the Eastern Bridge and had later traveled to Beatrice Whitmore's cottage near the Standing Stones. More troubling still, the archivist had removed an unidentified parchment from the royal records before meeting her. Vivian's confident smile slowly disappeared. None of those events had existed in the future she had carefully expected. Every change seemed connected to Madeline, and every change carried consequences that could not yet be measured. She quietly instructed Gideon to watch both Edmund and Beatrice without revealing the palace's interest. If forgotten secrets had begun resurfacing, she intended to discover them before anyone else. As evening settled across the kingdom, Madeline stood alone beside a quiet hill overlooking Mooncrest Palace in the distance. From there she could see hundreds of lanterns illuminating the celebration she had once dreamed of attending. Instead of sorrow, she felt unexpected peace. She had stepped away from a future built upon misunderstanding, yet destiny continued reaching toward her despite every effort to walk another path. At that same moment Damon suddenly turned toward the distant hills as though hearing a silent voice carried by the evening wind. His silver eyes fixed upon the fading horizon, and for the first time since awakening from his strange dreams, his wolf became completely still. Somewhere beyond the palace lights, he knew with absolute certainty that the person he had been searching for was looking back toward him, even though neither of them could yet understand why. The celebration inside Mooncrest Palace continued long after the stars filled the sky, but for Madeline Carter the distant music sounded less like a festival and more like an echo from a life she had already left behind. She remained on the quiet hillside until the last glow of sunset disappeared, wondering how many unseen threads had already changed because she had made a single different choice. In her first life she would have entered those palace gates with a hopeful heart, believing that honesty alone could protect her from jealousy and deception. Now she understood that kindness was strength only when guided by wisdom. She returned to Beatrice Whitmore's cottage before midnight, where the old seer was waiting beside a small fireplace as though she had expected her arrival. Without a word, Beatrice placed another weathered volume upon the wooden table. Unlike the first journal, this one contained carefully copied royal family records collected from forgotten monasteries and abandoned libraries across the kingdom. As Madeline slowly turned the brittle pages, one name appeared again and again beside the image of the silver wolf crest. It was not the name of the first silver Luna. Instead, it belonged to a noble house that had officially vanished generations earlier after being declared extinct by royal decree. Yet several entries ended abruptly, as though entire chapters had been deliberately removed from history. Beatrice quietly explained that powerful families sometimes disappeared on paper long before they disappeared in truth. The old woman believed descendants could survive for centuries without realizing the bloodline they carried. Madeline lowered her eyes to the faded portrait she had discovered earlier, and for the first time she wondered whether her ordinary childhood had been built upon an extraordinary secret. Meanwhile, inside the palace archives, Edmund Hale carefully unlocked a hidden chamber beneath towering shelves filled with ancient records. The room had remained sealed for decades, opened only by the chief archivist whenever forgotten documents required preservation. As he carefully arranged newly recovered scrolls, his attention returned to the empty space where the silver wolf parchment had rested before he entrusted it to Madeline. Although he believed he had acted according to conscience, a quiet concern settled over him. Someone else had clearly been searching for the same document long before he found it. His thoughts were interrupted by soft footsteps beyond the chamber entrance. Gideon Mercer appeared with polite courtesy, claiming he wished to review ceremonial records connected to the mate ceremony. Edmund welcomed him without suspicion, never noticing how carefully Gideon's sharp eyes studied every shelf and every locked cabinet while pretending to admire the archive's remarkable collection. Elsewhere, Damon Ashford dismissed the final guests of the evening before walking alone through the moonlit palace gardens. The restless feeling inside him had grown impossible to ignore. As he passed beneath blooming white dogwood trees, his wolf suddenly froze. For a brief instant Damon saw the image of a young woman standing only a few feet away, her long light brown hair moving gently in the night breeze as she smiled with quiet sadness before fading like mist beneath the moonlight. He hurried forward, but the garden stood empty. Only a single white blossom drifted onto the stone path where the vision had appeared. Damon slowly picked it up, unable to explain why the simple flower filled him with overwhelming longing. At that same moment, miles away, Madeline reached for the old journal once more when a folded note slipped unnoticed from between its pages. The handwriting was different from every other entry. The ink looked newer, almost as though it had been written only a few years earlier instead of centuries ago. Her eyes widened as she read the opening sentence. It said, "If you have found this message before the kingdom remembers your name, then someone has already begun changing the future, and the greatest danger is not the woman standing against you. She is only following the orders of the one who has remained hidden through both lifetimes." Madeline Carter read the mysterious note again beneath the quiet glow of the fireplace until every word became impossible to ignore. The message carried neither a signature nor a date, yet its careful handwriting felt strangely familiar, as though the author had expected her to discover it at exactly this moment. The warning changed everything she believed about both of her lives. Vivian Hawthorne had always appeared to be the architect of every tragedy, but if the note spoke the truth, then Vivian had merely been following someone whose identity remained hidden behind years of carefully arranged deception. Madeline slowly folded the letter and placed it inside the journal, realizing that changing her own choices had uncovered secrets that had never surfaced during her first life. She looked toward Beatrice Whitmore, whose thoughtful silence revealed that even the old seer had not expected this discovery. Beatrice admitted that many prophecies revealed only fragments because complete knowledge could tempt people to force destiny instead of understanding it. She urged Madeline to remain patient and to trust what each new memory taught her rather than searching for every answer at once. Those words settled gently inside Madeline's heart. In her first life she had rushed toward every promise because she feared losing happiness. This time she would allow truth to reveal itself one step at a time. Across the kingdom, Damon Ashford found no rest despite the late hour. Long after the palace had fallen silent, he entered the royal training hall where moonlight spilled across polished stone floors. He hoped that familiar routines would quiet the strange emotions building inside him, yet the moment he reached for his sword his wolf suddenly froze. Without warning, another vision flashed before his eyes. He saw a pair of gentle hands placing fresh white flowers inside a crystal vase near a palace window. He heard soft laughter carried by the spring breeze. Then the image disappeared as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind only a deep sense of longing and an unbearable certainty that he had once treasured those ordinary moments more than any royal victory. Damon lowered his sword, pressing one hand against his chest as though trying to calm a heartbeat that no longer obeyed reason. His wolf was no longer merely restless. It was remembering emotions that belonged to a life his mind had never lived. The following morning Queen Mother Rosalind Ashford quietly requested a private conversation with Nathaniel Brooks, the respected royal healer. She described Damon's unusual dreams, his growing distraction, and the mysterious changes in his wolf. Nathaniel listened carefully before explaining that ancient mate bonds occasionally carried emotional echoes impossible to explain through ordinary knowledge. While people forgot what time erased, the wolf's spirit sometimes remembered loss even when memory itself remained hidden. Rosalind thanked him, but the explanation only deepened her concern. If an invisible bond had already begun awakening, then events beyond the palace walls were unfolding far differently than anyone realized. Meanwhile, Gideon Mercer secretly returned to Vivian Hawthorne with troubling news. The palace archives contained references to an erased bloodline connected to a silver wolf crest, but several important records had disappeared before he could examine them. Even more concerning, Edmund Hale appeared determined to protect whatever he had recently uncovered. Vivian remained outwardly calm, yet her thoughts raced behind composed eyes. She had spent years preparing for one future. Now every carefully arranged certainty was beginning to unravel because of one Omega who had unexpectedly refused to follow the path everyone expected. Later that afternoon, Madeline traveled to the eastern meadow where the old bridge overlooked the quiet stream she had crossed days earlier. She had come seeking solitude, hoping the peaceful landscape would help her understand the growing puzzle surrounding the forgotten bloodline. Instead, she noticed fresh hoofprints leading away from the road toward a secluded grove where no travelers usually ventured. Curious, she followed them through the trees until she reached a small clearing bathed in warm sunlight. There, resting upon a weathered stone altar covered with moss, lay an ornate silver pendant engraved with the same ancient wolf crest that had appeared on the hidden parchment, the forgotten journal, and the mysterious portrait, as though someone had intentionally left the first undeniable piece of her true inheritance waiting for her to find it. Madeline Carter reached toward the silver pendant with careful hands, almost expecting it to disappear like another impossible vision. Instead, the cool metal rested solidly against her fingertips, its finely crafted wolf crest catching the afternoon sunlight with a quiet brilliance that seemed untouched by time. As soon as she lifted it from the weathered stone altar, a gentle warmth spread through the pendant before flowing into her palm. It was not painful. It felt strangely familiar, like returning to a place her heart had always remembered even when her mind could not. Turning the pendant over, she discovered a tiny inscription engraved along the back. It read, "The true guardian shall never seek the crown, yet the crown shall always find the true guardian." Madeline repeated the words softly, realizing they reflected every decision she had made since awakening in this second life. She had walked away from the palace, abandoned every ambition connected to becoming Luna, and chosen only to protect innocent lives. Yet with every step away from power, hidden pieces of her past continued finding their way to her. Before she could study the pendant further, hurried footsteps echoed through the nearby trees. Edmund Hale emerged from the forest path, breathing heavily after what appeared to be a long search. Relief filled his face when he saw the pendant safely in Madeline's hands. He quietly admitted that he had followed clues left by forgotten maps inside the royal archives, believing the ancient heirloom had been hidden in the grove generations earlier to protect it from those who wished to erase the Silver Luna bloodline forever. Before he could explain more, another sound drifted through the clearing. Horses approached along the distant trail. Edmund's expression changed immediately. He urged Madeline to hide the pendant beneath her cloak before leading her toward a narrow path concealed by thick evergreens. Moments later, Gideon Mercer rode into the clearing with several palace guards. He examined the empty altar with growing frustration before questioning Edmund about the purpose of his visit. Remaining calm, the elderly archivist explained that he had simply come to verify old boundary markers mentioned in historic records. Gideon appeared unconvinced, but without evidence he could do little more than continue searching the surrounding woods. Hidden among the trees, Madeline watched in silence as realization slowly settled over her. Someone else had known about the pendant. Someone had been searching for the same inheritance long before she found it. Meanwhile, inside Mooncrest Palace, Damon Ashford stood before the council chamber as respected elders debated unusual reports concerning missing royal documents and unexpected activity near forgotten historical sites. Their discussion faded into the background when Damon's wolf suddenly surged with unmistakable urgency. A vivid memory flashed across his mind without warning. He saw himself gently fastening a silver pendant around the neck of a smiling young woman beneath blooming white dogwood trees while promising that no matter what trials awaited them, she would never stand alone. The vision vanished instantly, leaving Damon frozen in stunned silence. He had never lived that moment, yet every emotion within it felt completely real. Queen Mother Rosalind noticed the sudden change in her son's expression and quietly dismissed the meeting before following him into the palace gardens. Damon admitted that the mysterious memories were becoming clearer. They no longer felt like dreams. They felt like forgotten promises waiting to be remembered. Rosalind listened carefully before encouraging him not to fear what his wolf was revealing. Some truths, she reminded him, arrived through the heart long before they could be explained by history. As twilight settled across the kingdom, Madeline and Edmund reached Beatrice Whitmore's cottage, where the old seer examined the pendant with quiet reverence. Her gentle smile faded when she noticed one final detail hidden inside the clasp. Folded into the smallest compartment rested a narrow strip of parchment bearing only a single sentence written in elegant silver ink. It read, "The kingdom will seek justice in the wrong courtroom until the hidden king reveals himself." The words hidden inside the silver pendant settled over the small cottage like a whisper carried through generations, and for several long moments no one spoke. Beatrice Whitmore carefully folded the narrow strip of parchment before returning it to its secret compartment. Her thoughtful eyes rested upon Madeline Carter with quiet certainty. She explained that every prophecy they had uncovered pointed toward the same conclusion. The kingdom had spent decades searching for enemies in plain sight while the true architect of its suffering had remained protected by influence and secrecy. The hidden king described in the message was not necessarily the ruler upon the throne but someone who had quietly gathered enough power to shape the kingdom from the shadows. Madeline felt the weight of every discovery pressing against her heart. During her first life she had blamed only Vivian Hawthorne for the lies that destroyed everything she loved. Now she understood that Vivian herself had been guided by a far greater hand, one patient enough to erase bloodlines, hide ancient records, and rewrite history itself. Rather than filling her with anger, the truth strengthened her resolve. She had not returned to seek revenge. She had returned to protect a future that deserved honesty instead of fear. The following morning, Queen Mother Rosalind Ashford requested that Damon accompany her to the Hall of Ancestors, a quiet chamber rarely visited except during moments of great importance. Portraits of generations of Alpha rulers lined the stone walls, reminding every visitor that leadership demanded humility as much as strength. As Damon stood before the oldest paintings, another wave of unfamiliar memories swept through him. This time he saw only fragments. A young woman wearing a silver pendant smiled as sunlight filtered through blooming dogwood branches. He reached toward her, not as a king but simply as a man who feared losing someone precious. The vision shifted without warning, leaving him with the crushing sensation that he had once watched her walk away while believing he had chosen duty over trust. Damon steadied himself against a carved stone pillar, his breathing uneven. Rosalind quietly placed a reassuring hand upon his arm and reminded him that true leadership required the courage to question even the stories everyone accepted without hesitation. At that same hour, Gideon Mercer returned to Vivian Hawthorne with another troubling report. Edmund Hale had disappeared from the palace archives after requesting an extended leave, and several historical documents connected to the forgotten Silver Luna bloodline could no longer be located. Vivian remained outwardly composed, but her confidence continued to fade. Every attempt to control the situation seemed to reveal another secret she had never anticipated. She instructed Gideon to prepare for a formal royal inquiry that would soon examine the missing records, believing the investigation could still be guided in their favor before the truth emerged. Neither of them realized that events had already moved beyond their control. Meanwhile, Madeline traveled with Beatrice and Edmund to an ancient stone sanctuary hidden deep within the forest where respected elders from neighboring packs had quietly gathered after receiving unexpected invitations from the old seer. One by one, Edmund carefully presented preserved journals, forgotten maps, and restored family records that had survived because Madeline had changed the course of history by saving his life. The assembled elders examined each document with growing astonishment until one elderly woman stepped forward carrying a sealed wooden box that had remained unopened for decades. She gently placed it before Madeline and explained that it had been entrusted to the council with instructions to deliver it only when the rightful heir of the Silver Luna lineage returned before the kingdom recognized her. Inside rested an ancient family register bearing generations of carefully recorded names. At the very end of the final page, written in elegant ink that had never faded, appeared the newest entry waiting to be completed. Beside the unfinished line stood a single name that left every elder in silent amazement. It was Madeline Carter, recorded long before she had ever discovered who she truly was.